Yeah, that was a bit of shock to me when I came into wargaming. I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna level up so much. I'm gonna be able to smash my indie dev soon." But I learned that it's really a world, like a completely
Mm,
different world. And just reusing that analogy of the vehicle physics engineer,
yeah.
I mean, they might work on a few different vehicles, tracks and wheels, and their how they skid on the ground for like it could be like a couple years. And
Wow.
then as an indie developer, I need to make a whole game, everything in it,
Yeah.
in like half a year. I'm working like a tenth of the time and making a complete game,
Wow.
whereas
Yeah.
they're working 10 times longer just on wheels and vehicle physics and
Yeah.
how it glides in the air. So I realized like on the actual implementation side of things, there's not that many transferable skills between AAA
Yeah.
and indie. It's just a
Right.
completely different beast.
Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Zero to Play podcast. I'm your guest host, Sorcha Millican-Nagle, and today I'm joined by Bilal Akil. Bilal is a senior programmer at Wargaming Sydney and has also juggled a bubbling career as an indie game dev alongside fatherhood and a master's degree. Bilal has spent more than 7 years in other industries, so we're here today to talk to him about alternative pathways into game dev, balancing your passions with other commitments, and working in AAA game dev as a programmer. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of the Zero to Play podcast. Hi, welcome Bilal to the
Hey,
show,
Sarika.
and thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
I believe it is a bit of a crazy hot weather out there. Is it the same for you at the moment?
Yeah, I'm trapped in this bedroom and it's pretty hot and sticky in here. Not very pleasant, but yeah,
Yeah, we're definitely getting the worst of it in Melbourne as well.
yikes.
It's not something you can avoid though.
Hmm.
Well, thank you for taking the time to come and chat to us today. I'm super interested in your background in game dev. Um, as you know yourself, you've got a really interesting, diverse history of changing jobs and different passions as well and hobbies that you've kind of intermingled with what you're currently doing. So I'm on the back of all that, as someone who I guess does seem to have so many passions and hobbies going on, what is it that actually really makes you, I guess, interested and like motivated to wake up in the morning?
These days, COVID doesn't help much. I mean, not the
No, it doesn't.
motivation is at probably an all-time low, I'd say. So that's a
Yeah.
struggle. But just it. I mean, one thing is fair to compare it to some of my past experiences. Just waking up and doing a game job, I feel like it's just the default motivation level is higher than it
Mm.
used to be. Like, even without me getting excited or pumped about anything, it's just working on games compared to say working on corporate stuff or websites. There's just a lot more energy in that practice itself, and I feel like that's because of all the colleagues and stuff doing it with similar feelings
Mm.
and reasons. Like everyone, say at Wargaming where I work, is passionate about games and they talk games and they analyze games and they make games.
Yeah.
And then back at like a startup or this telco company I worked at, like no one really cares. I mean, it's just about
No.
we're getting paid to help someone else make money. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, technically that's what's happening at the game studio as well, but they make money through us making awesome games and players
Yeah.
being happy. So it's like just the default motivation level has been higher since I moved to the game industry, which is cool. Um,
Mm.
and then other than that, the motivation kind of comes and goes in waves. And I think it's fair to recognize that. And if it goes away,
Mm.
you shouldn't beat yourself up. I found myself kind of falling in these patterns where I was kind of guilt tripping myself, like you didn't work enough outside of work, even though I'm a
Mm.
father and a husband. It's like, wait, dude, you don't need to put pressure on yourself. Just if you don't feel like it, it's okay. You don't need to keep pushing yourself. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's only so much you can actually do sometimes in a day as well, and learning to manage that amongst everything else is one thing in itself, let alone keeping motivated to actually do it.
Yeah.
How did you find it, I guess, leading up to your current job and currently, because you're working at Wargaming at the moment and juggling fatherhood, and are you still working on your indie games outside of that?
I I am still working. What I did, I'm taking one day off from wargaming, so I've got
Yep.
every Wednesday off, and I use that as like a guaranteed 8 hours of indie game dev at least.
Oh,
And
that's a
then
great idea.
and then if I have any more juice or motivation, I'll try to work at night after everyone goes to sleep. But recently that's not been happening much. So just having that locked in 8 hours is very
Yeah.
useful. I mean, I'm obviously in a very privileged position to be able to do that, to be able to afford it and be in a job that would accept me doing that. So,
Mm.
um, but that was something I was kind of aiming for. Like I knew when I came to the industry that I did want to make my own games. So I wanted to see how can I make that happen. And trying to find a way to take some part-time off was part of the things I was looking for in that regard.
Yeah, especially if you've got a whole day dedicated to it, it gives you that time. So if you don't have the energy in the evening, you can take some time to actually focus
Yeah,
properly. Yeah.
exactly.
So you did work at a couple of, well, quite a few other roles in the past as a software engineer that weren't directly in game development. How did you sort of build up your project work and your indie game dev and take the time to learn game development?
I kind of didn't actually. This is kind of
Yeah.
a weird thing, one of those alternative paths into the industry. So I came from a background largely in web tech, but kind of just general software engineering, kind of jack of all trades. I knew quite a few programming languages, quite a few frameworks, just all bunch of stuff. I studied cloud computing at university, so I had some
Well,
data science stuff on that side, and so I just had lots of stuff. And what that meant was that it gave me a lot of flexibility when looking for jobs.
mm,
So if I would really recommend anyone thinking what career should I go into, think about programming because it's really hot at the moment.
yeah,
Every company needs a
there's a lot of
programmer.
jobs.
And
Yeah.
when you're good at it, like when you've built yourself up to that point where then you can kind of start moving horizontally. The cool thing
Mm,
about software engineering is that lots of different industries need it. So if you just become a
yeah.
good software engineer, then you can be like, ah, well, maybe I want to work in healthcare, and there'll be some science med tech companies that need software engineers. Maybe I want to work in game dev, and there'll be game companies that need software engineers. And so you can just kind of start
Yeah.
picking and choosing at that point. So the way I got into wargaming was I got a UI engineer role. And although I didn't really
Mhm.
have much game experience to show specifically, I think at that point I had one game that I made and a game jam.
Yeah.
So one long project, which, your first project, you scope too large, everything goes out the window. Um,
You always, yeah, think it's going to be a lot quicker.
yeah, and then one game jam project. Game jams are much better, nice tight scope. So I didn't have
Mm,
that much experience, but because I applied for a UI role and my past software engineering experience, I made apps for different cross-platform websites and all kinds of different UIs. That wasn't too hard for me to land. And so then I was
yeah.
in wargaming, I was in the industry, and soon I was able to show that actually I'm much better at non-UI things as well. And so now I'm not a UI engineer anymore. I'm just the general purpose software engineer at a game dev company, which is good. So that's one of the good
That's pretty cool.
alternative
Yeah.
pathways. So I kind of dodged all the competition because I'm not sure
Mm.
where the listeners would be hearing this from, but in Sydney, there's kind of a weird situation where there's a huge number of game dev students and not that
Yeah.
many jobs. So the competition
Mm.
is very fierce, and I kind of just completely went around it. I didn't have to compete with them. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, you got very lucky in that sense as well. Not lucky, I think you definitely earned it because it is very difficult when there are so many degrees out there that are game development and that are aimed at getting straight into game dev, and you have all of these hundreds of thousands of graduates coming out and they're trying to land game dev roles, but it's like that's directly where the competition is coming from. So I think having, as you're saying, those cross transferable skills is really helpful because you can learn so much and build up many, many years of experience in other ways that might not directly be in game dev.
Yeah. And then also it gives you a kind of safety net where even if you can't get a game dev job, you can still get a good job somewhere else. Whereas if you
Yeah,
only did game dev, that could even be a bit difficult. So
yeah. You're not locking yourself into one particular role. So if you were studying one thing and then trying to be a game designer and studying game design, for example,
yeah, that's right.
do you think looking back, if you had the chance to have changed what you studied, that you would have studied something specific to game dev?
I might have tried to find a way to like major in game dev, so still kind of
Mhm.
generic computer science, but majoring in game dev or something. Um, so that would have still given me that kind of fundamental set of skills, which is highly transferable. But I'm kind of
Yeah.
bummed that I just didn't get to do any game dev at uni. Like it would have been so fun. So it's a bit of a
Yeah.
regret.
There's a couple of sort of research coming out at the moment saying that there's a lot of industries trying to pick up gamification and other methods like that. So maybe there is a place for universities to actually teach a little unit of game dev if you're doing something like programming or art, just to kind of share the mechanics a bit more.
Yeah, I think there are some. I think most universities would have some game dev courses. I remember when I went to uni, I didn't do it myself, but one of my friends was
Mm,
doing a course where they use something called processing, this little
processing.
language. It's a terrible name. You try to Google
Yeah.
something with it, and then you just get completely irrelevant results because it's just like
Processing food,
exactly. And
processing ideas.
I remember that friend of mine asking for help sometimes, and then I saw that their assignment is like just to make this little game, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so jealous. I just want to do
Oh,
your assignment for you.
you could have asked me, like, can I just, submit that on your behalf? You can take the grades, but I'll just do it for you.
I would have been happy to.
Yeah, I think they do teach a couple of those game design as a unit or so as well, but even structuring it as a major, having that to add on to more degrees would be quite beneficial.
Yeah.
So I noticed you had a master's in philosophy. Was that before you kind of decided to move into game dev?
So the terminology is a bit funny. It's just a university thing, I guess. You know what PhD means? It means philosophical doctorate, but it doesn't.
Oh,
And what the master is called MPhil, Master of Philosophy. But actually, I didn't study philosophy. The I
okay,
think
that
the
makes more
I think
sense.
the logic behind it is when you're doing research, like on an actual new topic, so you're producing
Mm,
research papers and stuff, you're kind of contributing to human knowledge, and that
yeah.
is a philosophical thing. S
You're kind of adding to the brainwave, the big consciousness of the world, I guess. So
yeah,
you're a part of the human
and,
conscience.
and and that is falls under the branch of philosophy. So that's why it was the Master of
Right.
Philosophy. But actually, what I was doing was cloud computing. So
Okay.
the research I did was on the topic of cloud computing. I was using
Yeah.
um, big data processing software and comparing them. But because that was new research, it was called Master of the degree itself was a Master of
Got
Philosophy.
it. Yeah, the I do remember reading a little bit about the actual topic, and it seems really interesting. Was that off the back of what you previously studied, or what was the kind of interest behind taking up that actual master's degree?
So that was a bit funny. There's a story to it. I really enjoyed my bachelor, and I did
Yeah.
it. It came and went in 3 years. It was a relatively quick one, and I had a lot of fun. And then I went into the industry. I'd already been working part time, and so when I finished my bachelor, I continued to full time, and I was just kind of making websites, apps, WordPress themes, backends, and these kinds of things. And I was starting
Yeah.
to feel that motivation going down after a couple
Yeah.
years. And I was thinking, huh, I really liked my bachelor. Why don't I get myself some more of that? Um,
More study.
so that's when I decided to do my master's. And I went back to one of my professors at uni, and he had a topic that he thought someone could research in. So I was like, okay, sure, I'll do it. And it happened to be the topic was bioinformatics. So that was
Bioinformatics. What a
like,
word.
yeah. So that was applying big data cloud processing to DNA processing. So that's where the
Wow.
bio comes in. It was in the DNA and stuff. So I
Okay.
knew nothing about DNA, so I had to learn.
So you're coding humanity, basically.
it's it's trying to find like I think what I was doing was trying to find differences between two people's DNA and like find
Mm.
find where things are potentially mutated and try to do that on a large scale. And that's where the large scale needed this dedicated cloud computing software. And I was comparing, okay, what if I do the same task with three different ones? Which one's faster? Which one's slower? Etc.
Yeah.
Etc. So yeah, I had to learn a bunch about DNA, a bunch about cloud computing, and all that. And unfortunately, I found that even that master's, it didn't work the same way my bachelor did. It wasn't ticking those boxes
Mm.
for me, and I felt the similar kind of slump as I was getting to that job
Yeah.
that
Right.
led me coming there. And I realized, why did I enjoy my bachelor so much? It's because, like you mentioned gamification already. I
Mm.
felt like my bachelor was kind of gamified in this big set,
Yeah.
like
Right.
all these little assignments. Each one of them is like a fun challenge. Well, fun because I like,
Ticking boxes.
yeah, that's because I really like programming, and so I'd get one that actually challenges my programming skills. I'm like, oh, this is fun, and then I finish it, and then you get good marks, and that's like the reward. So
Mm.
it's like a game loop.
Completing the hard work, getting the loop and the reward of finishing it and going, oh, great,
Yeah,
I've got my marks. And yeah.
and that was all like short, repetitive, rewarding cycle. But then a
Mm.
master's was just like, boom, X years. This is the beginning.
Yeah.
This is the end. Fill in the gaps, kind of.
And make it up in between that. And it's a big like swath of time as well to have to do.
It's
Yeah.
enormous, and you need to figure out your own path, and there's not really many checkpoints in the middle, and it's just
Yeah.
like, oh goodness, I didn't know what I was getting into there.
You, not as many loot boxes as you'd find in, say, like a bachelor's degree after every little assignment. And
Yeah, exactly right. I didn't realize that when I signed up to it, but that's what it
yeah.
turned out to feel like. And maybe for some people, that idea of having a big blank canvas and throwing yourself
Mm.
at it for a couple of years, that could be attractive to some because it's like something you could really dedicate yourself to. But it just personally, for whatever reason, didn't work out that well for me.
So if you're looking at a master's in, if you want to go on the game puns again, it's like open world, whereas the bachelor's is more of a really linear RPG, and you know the story and exactly how it's going to progress.
Kinda, yeah. There's like each quest, and every quest is rewarding, but the
Yeah.
maybe the other one, like open world, like Minecraft. Minecraft is just like you spawn, here you are,
Am I here?
play.
And then they added the ending, but okay, I'm just kind of running around. Do I build something or do I not die? What do I do
Yeah,
now?
it's like there's
Yeah.
an ending, but that's about all. You don't know, like, how do I even get there?
Yeah. Do I need to get there? Should I just avoid the creepers?
Yeah.
It's an interesting process, I think, because a lot of people will often go, you know, you finish high school and you go and get your degree, and it's pretty standard pathway. So I think taking the time to think about exactly what that pathway might be for some people, or not studying for a while even. But I do wonder if there is that pressure on people who go, ah, yes, I want to get into game dev, therefore I should study a game development degree, kind of pushes them straight into the degree, and there's not that time to think, well, what other areas would I might want to explore and so forth.
Hmm.
So I think it's cool that you kind of took at it from an angle of engineering as a whole and really explored that path for yourself and what that discipline means.
I kind of coincidentally fell there. I,
Mm.
I find it weird looking back because I remember when I was at high school, it was when I was 13 was the first time I started kind of programming something, and that was a Warcraft 3 map. So I actually started with game dev. That was the first thing I did.
Yeah, that's cool.
And then it went from Warcraft 3 maps to World of Warcraft add-ons. So like you could customize the user
Yeah.
interface. And there was actually a big difference there. In Warcraft 3, you used a kind of visual programming tool.
Mm.
It's kind of like blueprints in Unreal Engine. I'm not sure if you or the viewers would be familiar, but essentially the difference is you're not typing code. And what that means
Yeah.
is you can't type something wrong. You don't need to worry about the syntax,
Yeah.
like, oh, I missed a semicolon, or I put a capital letter there when I wasn't supposed to. So in Warcraft 3, it was like a big bunch of enormous drop downs. Like you'd have a drop down
Mm.
menu with like everything that the programming language can do. So it was huge drop
That's great.
downs.
Yeah.
But what that meant as someone coming into it was that I couldn't really make a mistake. It wouldn't let me make a
Mm.
mistake. And so it was just exploring what can I do with this thing. And I didn't have any teacher, so it was literally me just picking things and pressing the play button, waiting
And giving it a go.
waiting 3 minutes for the game to load up, and then see what happens, and slowly discovering, so this does this, and kind of by trial and error learning programming. But then when I came to World of
Yeah,
Warcraft add-ons, that changed and it was actually writing code. And
yeah,
I mostly learned that from copy pasting and changing from other people. So I'd take maybe a few add-ons that I liked, and then I'd try to strip the parts of it I like and put it in like a bundle. And so
yeah.
then I was like taking their code and trying to clean it up somehow. And then I was slowly learning programming, the actual act of writing code through that. Um, and that's when I kind of started to fall in love with just programming itself. So it was at
Mm.
that point less about game dev and more just, oh my God, I can type some words and then the computer will do something.
Something
Like, oh my
happens.
God,
Yeah.
that was mind
it's
blowing.
it's like solving a problem and making something happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then when I went to uni, that was the only thing I was thinking about. So it's like I forgot about game dev, even though that's what got me started. But then I was like, I just
Mm.
want to do as much programming as I can. I love programming. I want to just program all the time. And so that's why I started working corporate jobs. I didn't even think about it. It's just like I'm a programmer, so
Why
I'm
not?
just gonna
Work in
program.
programming. Yeah.
And then it was only after my masters and after doing a couple jobs where I'm like, this isn't working for me. What's going on? And I was like, hang on a
Mm.
sec. I used to love making games. What happened? Why did I not do any of that? And so
Yeah.
I kind of went on a very big circle and came back to game dev. But at this point, I was a pretty solid programmer because I'd spent all those
Yeah.
years focusing on programming. And
And also, you were driven by your passion too.
yeah, it was like two passions. So there was a passion for game dev, which I somehow forgot about because it was dwarfed by this passion just for programming itself. And then
Mm.
I learned, hang on, I used to have that passion for game dev. Let's bring it back. And now that's actually working quite well for me because I'm
Yeah.
finding there is that intrinsic motivation just from working in game dev compared to
Mm.
working in, say, just a random corporate field.
Corporate or yeah. And you've also got the prior experience of having worked as a programmer in other areas to see how that can apply and what that looks like.
Yeah.
Um, for some viewers here that maybe aren't coders as well, and keeping that in
Sorry.
mind, but you're welcome. They're fine. What would you say are some of the transferable skills from your time as a programmer at other industries to, say, game dev?
So I'm just trying to make sure I understand the question. What are some of the transferable skills, but for other roles, not as a programmer? So,
I think specifically as a programmer. So obviously, programming is programming in game dev too.
right.
I guess, did you find that any of your experience for corporate transferred particularly well in game dev?
Okay. Well, there were definitely some just the nature of working with teams. So I know when
Mm,
I worked at that big telco, for example, that was the first time I really worked on a properly structured team, and we were doing sprints, and we had a project manager and these kinds of things. And now I've
yeah,
moved to wargaming, and that very largely transferred over. And so I had already had experience working in such an environment, which was very useful. So
yeah,
there's that aspect for sure, and just the nature of working and collaborating with people.
yeah.
I've interviewed some people at Wargaming, and you can kind of tell when someone's never worked really as a team before. Um,
Yeah,
uh,
just by themselves or not properly amongst a team.
yeah, and so just having that exposure to a professional environment and um, having teammates in your mind and that you're not working alone and this is a team effort, like that
Mm,
comes through, and that's a pretty important skill to build because that's not really something that comes naturally. I mean, I'm not sure
mm.
unless you play like soccer profession like seriously, then you know
Yeah,
how important that teamwork
or
is.
basketball, or you're in a team sport of some kind.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but in a like in just normal life, when you're at school, when you're at uni, you don't really develop those skills of really working as a cohesive unit. So that's of course a transferable skill to get.
Yeah, I think it's particularly important in game dev as well, where we have such a collaborative industry, as you were saying earlier. Everything is sort of happening all at once. There's not really start to finish where there's one or two people working on something, and then later on there's one person. There's so many different cross-discipline teams working together all the time,
Yeah.
and being able to know your place in the team, but also how you can help other people is super important.
Yeah, for sure. Unless you're indie and you have to do literally everything.
True. If it's just you by yourself.
Yeah.
That's a very good point, actually, because I think for you as a programmer, how have you found that working for your indie experience? Did you ever try to teach yourself other disciplines like art or audio?
I have. My last few projects have been collaborations. I found people who are happy to work with me. So we kind of found a, what's the word? Symbiotic relationship where we're both
All at once.
we're both benefiting from each other's presence. So, I
Yeah,
don't have money to pay people, but they're happy to work because they're building, like they're putting a
that's
game
good.
out for
Yeah,
themselves, and I'm happy to work with them because it's increasing the quality of my game, and so,
yeah,
but that that was just me and one other person, so still many hats for sure. But I have also worked on games where I've done literally everything. And I
yeah.
gotta admit, when I'm on Twitter and I'm seeing all this work that artists are doing, I'm like, oh, it's so beautiful. And I
I want to do all the beautiful art.
Yeah, so I get these creative urges where it's like I want to drop everything and become an artist. Uh, but I gotta hold myself back. And I feel like I've gone on such a tangent. I can't remember what the question was. I'm sorry.
Oh no, it's good. I was enjoying that because I've sometimes had that urge too. It's like I'm a producer, but I want to just go and do some art.
Yeah.
We're just talking about how you try to learn other disciplines as an indie dev, or if you feel that you actually need to.
So I felt like I needed to, but then I
Mm,
realized it's not that easy, right? And to become an artist like those I see on Twitter, I would probably need thousands of hours of practice because
yeah,
that's how much they've done. Like we're seeing a tweet and it's beautiful, but we're not seeing all the practice and that came behind it.
yeah,
And so I
and the
realized like
work.
I really can't do that unless it's something I want to actually change my life around. So what the result was, I needed to design a game that didn't need me to do that.
Mm,
So that would mean completely changing the theme, that so it doesn't need art that I can't produce. So I know I made one game, I called it Uni Tower, that was from a game jam, and that was like I just used letters.
mm,
So the whole visual, everything you see was just letters and colors. And so that means I didn't need art skills, and I was able to produce something which was still like cohesive. It still looked planned, so to speak.
yeah,
Um,
and put together.
but it was something that I could actually achieve. So I guess what I'm saying is, as an indie, you need to think, what can I do? What like skills do I have access to? Or more
Mm,
importantly, what skills don't I have access to? And you need
yeah,
to plan your game around that. You can't just say, this is my dream and try to fill in the boxes and then realize, like, hang on, I actually can't fill in this box. We don't have the
yeah,
skills to fill it in. You need to make sure you remove those boxes completely before you even start the game.
yeah. That's a really good point, especially if you are juggling work and other commitments and you're trying to make a game. Knowing what you can't do means you can just focus on what you can do really well, and then maybe from there push the boundaries a bit and try something new as you need to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a hard balance.
Yeah, it's all about cutting scope, I found. I mean, I feel
Yeah,
like new game developers will always hear the same thing. It's like just cut the scope, and
yeah,
your first game's always going to be too big. And like it's cliche, yeah, but that's exactly what happened with me. My first game was way too big, it was too ambitious, and we barely
yeah.
scratched the surface of it. In my case, it was after my uni, and I burnt like 9 months of savings,
Oh
and
no.
then I ended up with like just a little sliver of what we planned.
Mm.
And I'm like, okay, I got to stop. This isn't gonna work out. But that was, I'd heard the same thing from people, and I'm like, nah, I got this.
Yeah, it'll be right.
Yeah.
We can do it.
So
Yeah.
so I learned,
9 months later.
yeah, I learned the hard way. And some people can make it work. I think Stardew Valley is always the example of like it
Yeah, yeah,
can work. Like, but I think they put like a few years. I wasn't able to do that, and I wasn't comfortable or that confident that even if I did
yeah,
that, I would actually get anywhere. So after that 9 months, that's when I was like, I'm gonna try a couple of really just. I wanted to break that. ice, so to speak. Like I
Mm,
wanted to just get on the other side of actually have a complete game, even if it's a really little
yeah,
one. And so
and feel that sense of achievement.
yeah, so then I just made two really, really little games. I think I made the first one in like 2 weeks, and the second one just in a 48-hour game jam. And
Yeah,
but I
nice.
made sure they were like actually complete end-to-end games, just small
Yeah,
ones, but still end-to-end. And that was like I got that taste of, hang on, I can actually complete things. They don't need to be huge, arduous tasks. Um,
yeah.
and so I learned that side. But of course, I dropped everything I learned and then went on another huge thing after. So yeah,
No, it's good. I think that and game jams are really good. Just taking the time to do a small project, or maybe that is why a game jam does work so well, because you've got, as you said, that condensed scope. You just have to get it
yeah.
done, and you want to get the end-to-end product so it's playable, and you actually have something you can take out the other end of it.
Yeah, it's a pretty enormous pressure that game jams can apply. This sense that if it's not done on time, then it's like nothing. It's kind of like all
Yeah,
or nothing, right? You won't even be able to submit potentially if you don't have a
yeah.
functional game at the end. So
You need to have a bit of an MVP of some kind.
yeah, so I find that pressure very motivating, perhaps not the healthiest form of motivation, but I know personally I work my best under pressure, so I kind of create pressured scenarios just to make
Yeah,
myself work more. So I
get it
know I
done.
did that recently, like I realized I wasn't working on my recent game much, so what I'll do to create the pressure, I'll make an announcement that there's going to be an update on this day.
Oh
And now
no,
it's like, okay, now that's gonna force myself to do it, even if normally
you
I
have
wouldn't
to.
want to. So that's kind of just,
Social motivation.
yeah, that's because I know how my brain works, and I know that means the next
Mm.
2 weeks as that update comes, I'm gonna start freaking out, and I'll actually work and do it. Um, so that might not work for other people. Maybe that'll really be too stressful or
Too much pressure.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I find that works for me personally. So and that's why I think game jams really work for me because it's just this is the end. It's only in 48 hours. Uh,
You only have that much time.
it's kind of hard to even fathom how little time that is. I didn't
Yeah.
the first game jam I did, and also the first hackathon. I'm not sure if you're familiar. A hackathon is
Yes.
like the non-game version of a game jam, so it's just like
Mm.
general software jams. And
Coding and other things that you might do, other disciplines.
yeah. So the first time I did a hackathon and the first time I did a game jam, it's like got nowhere. I completely underestimated how little time I had. And so
Yeah.
I think in that hackathon, after like 36 hours of a 48-hour hackathon, I had like a very well engineered, excellent login system.
It's smooth and fluent and
Yeah,
it
and it's
works.
like I could
And
just click one button and it would deploy it and it would update nicely and all these things. And then I realized I I had this plan for a thing to make, and all I have is a login system. It's like,
you got the start done. It's really engaging for, people just starting.
yeah. So so then what you learn is next time I need to have that login system in like 20 minutes, not 36 hours. It's like I need that just
Yep.
immediately. I can't spend any time on like any of that fancy one-click deploy stuff. What am I doing? I'm only gonna deploy it once. So with the game, my first game jam was kind of similar, and so after my second one, it was much more like I was much more burned. Like, oh my God, like,
Mm.
and then when I heard the team throwing all these ideas, I was just like, no, we're not gonna make it. Uh, so
You've only got so much you can do.
yeah,
Cut the scope.
exactly. So I feel like that's something people just need to experience because it's hard to kind of
Mm.
comprehend just how little time that is. Um,
Yeah.
so
Especially when you factor in whether or not you choose to sleep in a game jam is a thing too. Eating, all of that takes up a lot of time. Talking to other people,
yeah.
just finishing it off. Yeah, there's a lot involved.
Mm.
I think it's quite interesting as well, coming from a more traditional programming background, and then for you now at Wargaming, being more live ops focused as well. Is that right?
Um, I wouldn't say I'm more live ops focused. I'm working on
Okay.
like a service that games, specifically wargaming games, can utilize. So
Yeah.
it's something that players
Okay.
will be able to access, but I'm not directly working on the game itself. It's kind of a It
Yeah,
uses
that's cool.
all kinds of tech, so it's leaning on my past experience pretty well because I had that
Yeah,
kind of general knowledge, and it does too. But I'm also I am I am working actually in the game engine as well. So it's kind of an
that's
interesting.
cool.
I'm a little bit everywhere, which is fun.
It's nice getting lots of different challenges as well and trying your hand at different things.
Yeah.
As a more senior programmer, how would you say your responsibilities differ from a traditional programmer? Or,
Well,
sorry, not a traditional, but from senior to programmer, I guess.
yeah.
What are the key differences?
Well, there's kind of two. I'll say there's two types of seniors or experts. There's the one
Mm,
which is like you're just really, really good at programming, and it's just you could get all the way to the core of a problem, just dive super deep, come out and solve it, and just
wow.
you're the solution guy. And
Mm,
there's the other kind, which is you're kind of a resource for the team type, where you can help boost the efficiency of everyone on your team, and they could
mm,
all rely on you if they need information. You know a lot of the stuff. I'm somewhere like more on that team side. I've got a bit of
yeah,
the depth. It kind of depends because my project is very wide. I've got depth in some areas of it, but I feel like personally I'm more on that team side. So a lot of the things I do is I identify when people on my team maybe are getting stuck on something, and if I can find things that can help get them
yeah.
unstuck, so to speak, and also help just kind of plan the path for things, and
Mm,
that means that if someone else has to come and work on it, that path is already there for them and they can just more confidently go ahead and work. So
right.
uh yeah, that I think that's a good summary of.
Yeah. So you're sort of planning the work in, not completely planning it, but sort of looking at how things might be done. And then also taking the time where there are parts of the project that people need help making a tool or actually helping implement something,
Yeah,
depending on what's needed.
yeah, especially when new people join the team or whatnot, it's important that they don't feel like they're on their own. um
Yeah.
and usually it would be a senior who helps show them how the project is working as such.
That's pretty cool. Do you see that there's a lot of, I guess, niche roles, or are there lots of different ways you can move around in programming at Wargaming in a, I guess, a big AAA studio?
Yeah, at a big AAA, there are definitely niche roles. I mean, I think Wargaming, we had like vehicle physics, like
Wow,
that.
so cool.
You're a vehicle physics engineer. Like that's really really niche.
Your sole job is vehicles and physics for vehicles.
Yeah, like how do the wheels interact if you go on a rock at
Yeah.
this angle and like yeah, it's crazy. And but yeah, working at a big place, it does have that benefit of horizontal movement. So you could say I want to focus more on say networking. I want to
Mm,
get experience on the networking side of things, how to make this game server communicate more efficiently to players, machines, and such. And then there'll probably be a team for that, so you can talk to your manager and
yeah.
set up a plan about transitioning to that team. And the managers, at least at Wargaming, are very supportive. I mean, a big part of I don't mean to plug Wargaming, but kind of just
I asked, it's fine.
um, kind of just a thing I'll tell people to look out for if you're looking for jobs because these good things do exist. Wargaming has a large focus on personal development, and it's actually even part of my annual progress review. How much personal
Mm.
development have I done? Am I meeting my personal development goals? And
Oh,
so
that's cool.
part of that is about where do I want to be in 1, 3, 5 years? What am I doing to get myself there? And so you could say if I want to get more graphics experience, or if I want to get start transitioning even to say a completely different role like game designer, um, they'll you'll have their support, and that means that could be meaning transitioning to another team and these
Mm.
kinds of things. But it's not like a
So,
cheat code. You still need to
yeah,
actually like be
do the
able to
work.
do the job, and they won't necessarily create a position for you if they already have all of their networking engineers and you're like, I want to do networking. They won't just be like, okay, go have fun.
Yeah, go for it. Enjoy. Bye.
So yeah, it's still professional. It's
Yeah.
just that you kind of already have that one foot in the door. It's not like you're on the outside and you have to look for different companies. It's that if there is a role there, you could kind of straight away be interviewed for it. But you still have to be
Yeah.
interviewed for it. You have to be qualified for it.
And go through the process of actually applying for a new job and
Yeah. Um,
yeah.
so so yeah, it's not like I said, not a cheat code, but it does
Yeah.
support that horizontal movement if that's what you really want to do.
It's good. I think a lot of bigger companies, especially, do leave a lot of room to try very specific roles. And I think it's interesting comparing it to, say, an indie game or an indie studio or a smaller studio where you do share a lot of responsibilities at sometimes.
Yeah, that was a bit of shock to me when I came into wargaming. I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna level up so much. I'm gonna be able to smash my indie dev soon." But I learned that it's really a world, like a completely
Mm,
different world. And just reusing that analogy of the vehicle physics engineer,
yeah,
I mean, they might work on a few different vehicles, tracks and wheels, and their how they skid on the ground for like it could be like a couple years. And
mm,
then as an indie developer, I need to make a whole game, everything in it,
yeah,
in like half a year.
yeah.
And I
And you
might
have
be
to know
working
every
part
part of
time
it.
as well. So that's like I'm working like a tenth of the time and making a complete game.
Wow.
Whereas
Yeah,
they're working 10 times longer just on wheels and vehicle physics and
yeah,
how it glides in the air. So I realized like on the actual implementation side of things, there's not that many transferable skills between AAA
yeah.
and indie. It's just a
Right.
completely different beast. So,
Interesting. Yeah. I think it brings back your point as well of when you are working in an indie or in an indie game studio or even doing your own indie games more specifically, you do need to be really conscious about what type of game you're going to make because you're going to have to make all of it yourself
yeah,
or with a select number of people.
yeah, for sure.
And there's not a lot there.
And it's usually cool if you can pick one thing you really want your game to be good at.
Mm,
I know an indie game. I don't know if it was released recently, but or is still in progress, but I can't remember its name. It's like Mars Rover Project or something. I think someone in Australia is making it, and it's like
yeah.
you're on Mars and you have to design these cars, these vehicles to transport
Mm,
like do deliveries of strangely shaped objects from one place to another on Mars. And so this is an example of a game where maybe if you were a vehicle physics engineer, those specific
it would be
skills
great.
would be good because the whole point of this game is vehicle physics. Like that is actually the
Yeah.
selling point of the game. And so there are ways in, especially in the indie world, where you can pick like a hyper fixation that your game needs to be really good at, and
Yeah.
that could need those very special skills. I think that game's going to do great if it hasn't already done great. Um, I,
Yeah.
uh,
Because it's so specific and based on that topic.
yeah, and
Yeah, find out if it's
I know as if you're putting on the game designer hat, one of your many hats,
mm,
that's also a fun task to take one core thing and think, what is the most fun game I can make just from this seed and put just
yeah,
only the things around it that really emphasize and build on that one experience. It's a
yeah,
fun concept compared to say a massive AAA indie game where they need to solve so many problems. It's like you just have one problem and what's the best way I can solve this one problem?
yeah. And you get a little bit more of a, as you said, hyper focus or a fixation on a particular topic, which in itself could be a little bit more exciting
Yeah.
sometimes. As a dev, how would you, or I guess what advice would you have for other programmers that are looking to get into AAA in terms of, would you recommend them changing different roles or looking at other disciplines or areas of programming to try and build their portfolio or expertise?
When you say look at other areas, do you mean other than game dev or what?
I guess, yeah, actually, now that you brought it up, in terms of someone who is a programmer and is really interested in furthering their career in game development, would you recommend them experimenting with other types of programming outside of game dev or changing roles as a programmer within their studio or within game dev itself?
I think the most important thing for programmer specifically is it's just the kind of the art of programming.
Mm,
Exactly what you program isn't as important if you're able to show that you're really good at programming. I know this language or
yeah,
this set of languages inside out. I'm up to date with the standards. When they release new tools, like I can jump on them, no sweat. I know that was one of my personal strengths. I was able to show that I I could work with, like, in quotes, anything.
Mm.
And the way I did that, so Wargaming, the role I was applying for, they wanted C++ experience. That's a particular programming language, and
Yep.
I've had pretty much no experience with it. And so I was able to put my money where my mouth is, and I was saying, look, I'll show you that I can work with anything by doing the programming test in C++, even though I have no experience with it, and I nailed it. And so that was like,
Nice.
clearly I'm actually like, I'm walking the talk,
You're
right?
experienced. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so so that was just because I spent those years just thinking about programming all the time and how can I
Mm.
program better. And that's a rabbit hole. Like, the art of programming, not even like a specific thing. It's not apps, it's not games, it's just the act of programming is a rabbit hole
Mm.
you can go down, and you
A
can
long time. Yeah.
continue to improve your skills at that. So I think that's like the the thing that'll make you the most hireable, just specifically as a programmer. It's just showing that
Mm.
programming is a thing that you're really good at.
Yeah. As a whole, and what experiences you have and how you've built that, just showing that you can do different things as opposed to needing to, I guess, tick a specific box.
Yeah. The days are long gone where it was like, I am a Java programmer. Like,
Yeah.
that doesn't really exist anymore, and that can come across as a red flag, because now the industry changes so much and so quickly that a person kind of communicating themselves as, this is the thing I do, is kind of like, hang on a sec, what if we're not going to do that for very long? Or what
Yeah.
if another thing's going to come up in a couple months, so you're going to be able to jump on that quickly? So the whole game now is about being versatile and being nimble, so to speak.
Yeah. And keeping up your skills in different ways, because as you say, the project might change, or maybe the studio will adjust what it needs. And having the skills or the experience to try different things and do things differently is really important.
Yeah, having the confidence to say, I will be able to contribute value regardless of what tool you use, and I'll be able to pick the
Mm.
right tool for the job and use it properly. That's
Yeah.
that's your job as a senior programmer, I guess.
Yeah. Knowing that there's not really going to be a specific solution in every situation, and sort of adapting as needed based on the problem at hand.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any, I guess, final advice or words of wisdom for indie developers looking to get into AAA?
Um, I would always recommend game jams. I
Yeah.
think that's just, it's so good at building a portfolio. I mean, I know the things I said there was that you don't like need a to only do game dev or something, like do programming, um, but game jams are just such an effective way to do a little
Mm.
end-to-end product, and you learn so much in the process. I think I've made maybe 8 games now, a bunch of them from game jams, and every one of them I learned so much compared to the last one. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that will ever stop. Like, I'll stop learning, and the next time I start a new game, I'll be at the same point I was before. Because at the moment, every time I start a new one, I'm one step further than I was
Yeah.
last time. And the I think it's important to recognize that you're probably not at your best, and you can keep
Mm.
improving. You just need to find ways to exercise that, so you actually keep climbing that ladder one step at a time.
I like that. It's a focus on personal development and acknowledging that there's always something different you can do to improve. Just the sad reality, I guess. It's positive reality in that sense, because no matter what you do, there'll always be exciting things to learn and new challenges to try
Yeah.
and take on as well.
It's an industry about learning, that's right. And every year or every few months you get Unreal Engine and Unity with some crazy new features, and so the
It's like, ah, new tool.
the landscape is changing. I know Godot is very promising at the moment, as a
Mm,
new engine. So um, yeah, it's a thing you need to just, like I said, stay nimble and
yeah,
flexible on.
agile, so to speak.
Yeah.
I had to slip one in there.
Well,
Well, I'd like to finally ask, I think you touched on it a little bit earlier, but how would you, I guess, summarize what makes you the most passionate about games?
Um, well, it's similar to the thing that made me passionate about programming. It just takes it kind of to
Mm,
another level. So the beauty is when you type something, you put some things together in like some editor, and then you hit a button, and then this thing that you created actually happens. It follows your
yeah,
instructions, and it's like, I taught it to do that, and it's doing that.
yeah,
And as a gamer myself, it just takes it to another level when that thing is a game. Like the fact that
yeah,
I can have fun playing my own game that I
yeah.
wrote all the code for, and in some cases I found music and threw all the things together, and I did all that, and now I can
Yeah.
actually just sit back and play it. And if you're lucky enough to reach the next level, that other people can too. It's a very surreal experience. I've had that fortune of having other people play my game, and to think that around the world,
Mm.
all over the place, there are two people sitting at their computers, their own eyes, looking at the thing
Doing the
that
thing
I spent time writing code for.
you made. Yeah,
It's a privilege to be able to potentially bring joy to other people's lives and my own
yeah.
life through my own creation. So I find that pretty incredible.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I think, as you say, it's that act of bringing something to life and having yourself enjoy it, but also if you're lucky enough, other people too. It's pretty lucky for us to, be in that world. Well, thank you very much for your time. That was really, really cool to get a really good understanding of how you built up experience as a programmer in other areas and tried game dev to begin with and did a whole full circle back into it, and now you're still pushing and trying new things and developing. So I think that's awesome. So thank you for sharing your knowledge and your experience, and yeah, hope you have a lovely day, and thank you everyone.
Thanks a lot for having me and for listening, whoever's out there.
Awesome. Thank you everyone. Bye.
See yous.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Zero to Play podcast. I hope you learned something about game development, the games industry as a whole, or the future of games. You can follow us on Twitter at Zero to Play, subscribe to us on YouTube or any other podcasting service. And I'll see you guys next week for the next episode.